So hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Aim Search podcast, where I get the opportunity to sit down with inspiring leaders and uncover their stories and hopefully pick up some golden nuggets for the listeners and myself along the way. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Mersiha Mehic, who not only built, scaled and sold her recruitment business, but stayed on through two huge acquisitions to build the biggest recruitment brand and platform in the Balkan regions. Mima's previously spoken on TEDx events and has been a recipient of numerous awards for her inspirational leadership. And she's recently launched her own podcast channel to share her wisdom and insights. She is the personification of inspirational leadership. And today I get to uncover her story. Mima, welcome to the show.
Hi, David. Thank you for having me, and thank you for such an amazing introduction. Thank you.
No,
I'm humbled.
my pleasure. Mima, could you begin by giving us a bit of an introduction, a bit of a background on yourself, please?
Sure. I'm going to provide you with a very brief overview of who I am and what I do. So my name is Mersiha Mima Mehic. I'm an entrepreneur, executive. I would say that I'm people first leader with 25 years of experience, driving growth, innovation, and talent across Southeast Europe. Currently, I lead one of the most influential employment platforms. It's called MojPosao.ba, and I'm part of Alma Career South leadership team that currently covers 4 countries. So my background basically blends HR, business development, digital transformation, from Fortune 500s to regional champions. I'm very passionate about in general, mentoring leadership, helping startups, but also women leadership. And in general, building places where people can truly thrive.
Oh, perfect. I love that introduction. And so I guess take us back to the start then, because obviously you've built up this incredible empire and recruitment platform, but take us back to the start. What kind of first got you into recruitment and this profession generally?
Well, I think then I'll have to go a bit further in history before that. So basically I come from an entrepreneurial family, but somehow it wasn't by choice, it was by necessity. My parents actually started a business during the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It was basically to provide and survive. So my sister and we started living by ourselves when we were just 13, 14 years old, and parents were there to keep us going. So I would say that these early ages actually very huge and profound effect, and taught me a lot about sacrifice, independence, and meaning of having support and family in your life as well. So when I started my personal entrepreneurial journey, it was out of pure choice and pure love. But somehow for the very long time, I believed in career and success was all about the building through the ladder, or, reaching a certain title, position, chasing new clients, conquering new markets or countries. But throughout my work, I realized that it's not just an upward journey, it's an inward one. So I would say that the real success nowadays for me is defined by the quiet work, self-discovery, building something meaningful from within and being out there for other people. So all of these things that I went through actually changed the way how I work, how I lead. And as a part of a founding team of MojPosao.ba platform, a startup that was actually initially acquired by a British Daily Mail group and later became a part of a Finnish Alma Career group. All of it was a huge lesson for me. So whether I'm in position of founder, executive, I've always tried to build places where people felt seen, supported, and empowered. Because I know how it is to start from uncertainty and how transformative it can really be when somebody believes in you. So throughout those 25 years, in building companies from startups, different industries, in talent acquisition and human resources, basically my primal drive was, helping individuals and organizations. This is very briefly.
No, I love that. And it's such a beautiful story, and I appreciate you sharing the context of your parents, coming from an entrepreneurial background. Your parents, set up and ran a business out of necessity. For you, it was more an opportunity to kind of build and grow something. And as I guess you've kind of got the reps in, as you've got the experience, the evolution of you probably as a leader and as an entrepreneur, it's more focused on the behind the scenes work. And I'd love to kind of tap in, later in the conversation, specifically how that's sort of evolved. But I think one thing that really interests me, obviously based in the UK, I've kind of worked the UK market in recruitment and the US. I think the geopolitical and sociocultural context of the regions you've been kind of working and operating in is such a fascinating topic in itself. So, I'd love to invite you to, talk a little bit about that and the kind of added complexities of recruiting in the kind of the regions you have been.
Yeah, I think talking about different cultures, but also, hiring experiences in Balkans, it's quite an interesting team because it's a fusion and very complex mix of different historical, economical, geopolitical factors. And as a foreigner, when you just come in, sometimes it's really hard to grasp all of it. And Balkan in general has high immigration rates. So basically, it's mostly when it comes to young professionals. So basically, that creates a significant talent drain, making it almost impossible for businesses in Balkans to find and retain skilled workers. However, due to the digitalization and remote work, it's much easier for talented people from Balkan, to find new opportunities without leaving home countries. But let me say like this, for people out there perhaps in need of talent to join their rooster, I think the casting net around the Balkan area, it's a very great move. This peninsula is basically made up of 7 countries. So it's Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Croatia, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Serbia. And it's really important to understand that each of those countries actually has unique culture and language. And it's not so common that actually people here speak several languages. Actually, students in the region are expected to learn multiple languages starting from the elementary school. So English obviously is always number one choice in most of the cases, and very, very popular. But apart from that, people in Balkans today speak fluently French, German, Spanish, Turkish, Italian as well. So it's an amazing talent pool, really. You would find normally a big number of professionals with many different skill sets. For example, like marketing experts in Serbia or software engineers and designers in Bosnia. So I think it's really smart to consider recruiting in this area, and a lot of U.S. companies have done so in past decades, for several reasons. When it comes to certain sectors, and the sectors, where people are likely to find talent in the Balkans, it's mostly IT and software development, finance and business service, but apart from that, also customer support and shared services. Actually, Balkan has been known for enormous outsourcing centers that are operating, for either States or the German duck market and so many other markets. And apart from that, also I would say that the sectors of design and digital marketing are very well developed, and tourism and hospitality. So in thinking, why would anybody hire people from the Balkan market? It's actually, apart from the fact that it's very rich talent pool, you can quickly find a wide range of skills and backgrounds. It's actually easier to find talent here than in any other regions in Europe. It's very cost-effective option as well. Recruiting in Balkans is appealing option because of the labor costs in certain countries tend to be lower than in other parts of the Europe. The very interesting thing is actually that countries in Balkan region, they have very strong education when it comes to STEM. So university across the region actually produce a steady flow of graduates in engineering, IT, and other science-related disciplines, which are people who are basically very competitive in other international markets. On the other hand, youth employment and active job seekers is also an issue. In many of those Balkan countries, actually, there is a high rate of youth unemployment, rates very high. So basically, there is a large pool of very motivated and well-educated people who are eager to earn experiences and grow their careers internationally. But apart from that, also there is this fact that people from this region actually have entrepreneurial mindset, which I think it's appreciated nowadays a lot. And I think it can be connected to the culture and to these decades of economical uncertainty. So many professionals in the regions have developed a strong entrepreneurial spirit of being flexible, adaptable, quick to learn, and in general taking in it. One of the good things is also very strong diaspora networks, so a lot of those things can actually benefit companies who are hiring internationally.
I love that. And I think it's so interesting, having kind of worked in recruiting the tech space myself as well. You see the typical kind of offshoring destinations, be it India or elsewhere in that kind of area. It's interesting to put the Balkan regions on the map and actually realize the talent density you have there, the multilingual talent, highly educated talent, which also is a cost-effective solution, but given the kind of cultural melting pot that, exists in many of these countries, I think it allows for a more seamless sort of integration with a company's culture, which particularly for startup and larger organizations, particularly startups where culture is such an important thing, it sounds like that entrepreneurial mindset coupled with, being multilingual is a real kind of value add for businesses looking to kind of offshore technical, services or teams. One of the things that I find interesting, and obviously a challenge you probably face on a daily basis, is how do you get the youth kind of unemployment and the youth talent? How do you kind of showcase them and get them out to market? Because obviously for companies that have traditionally considered other kind of offshore locations based in, India, as an example again, what do you do to, help showcase that talent that you've got in the Balkan region?
Well, that's a great question, and I'm afraid not an easy one to answer. Sure. I would say it really depends, what industry or sector is in question when we talk about youth. For example, for several last decades, there is a huge brain drain when it comes to youth finishing their studies in medicine or engineering, because if we don't have enough opportunities in countries here, people are moving abroad. So a lot of those people actually moved to, Turkey, Germany, Austria, and these are the countries that are traditionally connected to this region. But what we actually try to do at Alma Career and MojPosao.ba, we're connecting international companies with vetted local talent. So not just in Bosnia and Herzegovina, also in Croatia, Serbia, and other countries where we operate. And we're also exploring different connections amongst countries, trying to pinpoint where the talent is and where are the companies that actually need this talent. So what has been really helpful is that in this process, we are not just focusing on, just job advertisement, or recruitment services. We actually provide deep insights of what's happening in the market. So we are continuously preparing different kinds of researches, strategic insights on what's happening in the market, but also like salary benchmarks and covering and consulting on sector-specific dynamics. And that has really proven, to give good results, because basically we had several cases where companies have decided to move where the talent is. It is kind of paradox in the age when we have digitalization and remote work and everything, but certain industries do require people to be in place. So as a company, we basically provide the whole set of those different services, connected to employer branding, recruitment, assessments, but even HR tech solutions that are tailored to customers' needs. I would say these are the things that are helping us.
Yeah, and I guess with the increase in remote working, it's an incredible kind of opportunity to connect and kind of act as the conduit between these sort of businesses that need this talent, maybe lack the awareness and the insights which you're providing to the businesses of actually, hey, look, you need a developer, you need strong, programming skills. We've got this here. Not only are they kind of a lower cost alternative to places you're considering, but also they probably speak like 4 or 5 languages, some of these professionals. Culturally, probably much more aligned maybe to some of these businesses. So I guess you're probably providing more value, and it kind of brings me on to my next question I was going to ask. You're providing more value in being that connector rather than just posting jobs and screening CVs. You're providing that deep industry insight to act as that kind of conduit between job seekers and employers. And I guess helped massively by the rise in remote working, it makes that kind of integration or pairing, more seamless. Is that probably a fair assessment or overview?
Yes, it's a great overview. And as you were talking, I figure out, apart from the insights we provide, and, nowadays we all have access to different kinds of research and data. But what I've seen is that companies are actually struggling even to use their internal data real time, because when they put strategy in place, it takes a lot of time to revisit the strategy and figure out what to do. And the market, and especially labor market, it's not waiting for us, to figure out what to do. So we are basically assisting with our own research and data, assisting companies also with applying their data, but also moving more swiftly and fastly on the market.
Yeah. And the question I was going to, kind of come on to, which you've kind of already addressed there, is I understand with your business, it's not traditional kind of recruitment agency now. You're providing more of a platform to showcase jobs and allow candidates to apply. But given the competition in the recruitment industry generally, how are you going kind of above and beyond and kind of differentiating yourself and kind of providing more value? You mentioned already about the industry insights, but what other things and levers have you kind of pulled on to provide that sort of additional value?
Well, I would say that we're somehow combining exactly non-traditional techniques and tools that were forgotten a long time ago when digitalization hit. So comparing to the companies and recruitment agency in other countries, we're using a lot of offline tools when it comes to talent attraction and recruiting in general, because the characteristics of not only Bosnia but several regions in the Balkan area is actually that we have a certain number of employees or job seekers that have high level of digital illiteracy, let's say. And these people are, not inclined to look for the job digitally. But also on the other hand, the key characteristics is that this region has a high unemployment rate of long-term unemployed people. So you basically have a pool of talent, potentially that could be easily trained and educated within a few months. But if you're going to reach out just digitally, you want to attract them, that you won't get their attention. So what we do different kinds of offline campaigns. We go into villages, we talk to people out there, do different kind of research, and then make a tailor-made campaigns. So depending on what the client needs are, obviously this is not, for outsourcing centers where you would need high-skilled people with the knowledge of several languages. Let's say for the position of mistress, somebody who would work in production or some other position. So I would say that that's a secret. I think we have all become a bit lazy, especially with AI, and everything being automated. So I'm really proud that we have kept this entrepreneurial spirit in a way of figuring out, how can we do this differently, using all the tools, but also figuring out what else is out there on the market. What can we do?
I find that so fascinating. I had a guest actually I spoke to last week, and she shared a shocking statistic with me. She had previously recruited, she was at JP Morgan, recruited white collar for 12 to 15 years before setting up her company. She realized that 70% of the workforce in Germany were deskless or blue collar workers. As I said, she previously had no experience working that, but given that these deskless workers weren't on LinkedIn, there was a big problem in Germany driving recruitment efforts there. And she created, I guess, her business, her chatbot was meeting the candidates where they're at. So they might not have been on LinkedIn, but they might have been on Instagram. They might have been on Facebook, for example. They might have been spending their time doing different things. So creating a custom chatbot that could engage with these workers she introduced a 3-minute interview screening thing, which it would be a chatbot, it would text, or it would just message candidates saying, what's your experience, give me a bit more information, and would immediately filter people in and out. And I thought, while so many people focus probably on that 30%, that white collar recruitment, actually looking at that 70% and taking a step back and understand what are the actual industry challenges. Let's not just chase the biggest fees and the biggest logos and brands. What fundamentally is the problem? And that comes back to the entrepreneurial mindset that you spoke about as well. I guess you being able to say, well, actually, there's a huge problem here. These people aren't on LinkedIn. Traditional methods and lazy methods aren't going to work. So I think that's really interesting. And you mentioned it leads us on nicely to AI. Talk to me a bit about how you mentioned we're getting lazier. Talk to me about how you think AI is shaping and changing the recruitment industry, and what your kind of predictions for how that's going to evolve further.
Well, I just want briefly to refer to what you were saying regarding the German market, because it's quite interesting. We also have a small team that's exclusively working for the German market. So what understanding the market needs and preferences of the job seekers is also key, because there is no way that you can actually recruit a person in Germany if the recruiter doesn't have the knowledge of a native speaker of German. So these are the small things and small tricks. So regardless who you're chasing, who you're trying to get, it's not going to happen. So switching to your question in regard to AI, I think these are the things actually where AI can help us. You wouldn't have this issue or problem of figuring out, I have enough talented people who have actually sufficient knowledge of German to be considered native speaker. So I think AI is already revolutionizing recruitment in general. And I watched your previous podcast. It was the guest Sydney Pearl. Yeah. I think he said Pretty much. So everybody who's interested, I think that they should go back and watch that podcast. And a lot has been said about AI these days, when it comes to recruitment. So there's no doubt, it saves time. It can eliminate bias in the recruitment process. So improves communication. It can promote diversity and inclusion in the process. And so many other benefits like connecting with applicants and candidate matching and screening. On the other hand, while I think we should absolutely use it, and we use it internally, I mean, for my personal purposes, it's intriguing for me the feedback that we're getting from research from the market. For example, last year, only 25 candidates, they actually said that they feel secure to be involved in the process where AI is involved. So I think we can't have solutions, that can apply to all. Thinking back again to the context of Balkans, we have significant portion of digitally illiterate people, or older portion of workers who are not inclined to be involved in AI processes as well. While on one hand we have improvement of efficiency, I think that human experience remains irreplaceable. It's really intriguing to see what's going to happen, because as we speak, there are daily challenges, So I think for both individuals and companies, it's really important to stay open-minded, and try to involve AI as much as possible in daily processes. I would say also that adaptability is going to be the key on side of humans.
I think it's interesting, and it kind of brings back that kind of saying that it's a tool, and using it as a tool, not the solution. I think I've actually been on kind of quite a lot of demos with kind of rec tech platforms that are offering kind of end-to-end recruitment solutions. And I think, it's telling that when I'm speaking to recruitment leaders and they agree to have a conversation with myself, there's obviously not a solution out there that's customizable to their needs and is offering everything they need. I think with these platforms that offer kind of end-to-end solutions, they're removing or neglecting the importance of that human element. And you spoke at the start of the podcast, and obviously it's followed through our conversation. The human element can't be understated. And I think that's what people are realizing. Although everyone's really excited and they're jumping on all these demos, all these different kind of AI platforms, maintaining that human level connection and focusing on what humans do best, I think ultimately is going to be the difference between the businesses and the companies that prevail and those that get lazy by just handing too much off to AI. And I think it's really interesting to kind of see how that's playing out. I think using it as a tool for specific purposes and ensuring there's transparency. So from a candidate's perspective, a business I was speaking to the other day, bearing in mind a lot of their workers, or rather the demographic of the candidates they're hiring, they're considering using AI for initial interview. Now, I actually coincidentally kind of posted a video the other day, was basically saying how would you feel? I always recruited at quite a senior level within cybersecurity. And I know for one, I'm pretty sure the candidates I spoke to would be very damaging for my brand or any brand I represented if I said, actually, by the way, I've not spoken to you yet. That was my AI chatbot. However, for different kind of employment groups or different, groups of workers who maybe don't want to spend time building a relationship with a recruiter, who don't want to speak to all these people who are just kind of nurturing them through the process, there is a use case there. But I think something that's really important with AI is to be transparent, be open and honest about where AI is being used in your process, and use it as a tool, not the entire solution.
Exactly. So I think it's going to extremely benefit certain sectors, certain parts of the process, because, when you say the human element, I think we have somehow jeopardized what's all the good in the human element, because we try to replicate it by improving processes and so on. But the part of the human element is also intuition, which is basically built on zillion of experiences, which is not so easy always to translate into algorithm. So I think that humans will definitely have the place in the recruitment process, irregardless what kinds of tools we use. Because when we talk about change, and when we talk about how it's going to affect people, we mostly think from our position. We're mostly thinking about people in our country, our region, or people of the same age group. Somehow we're always neglecting, specifics when it comes to other parts of the world, or, people who are not within our cycle.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think AI can take off the blinkers in many ways, that when people talk about AI actually, having bias or not having bias, obviously it depends what data set it's trained on. But I think as a recruiter, obviously, I've been guilty of the past of, I do have my kind of subconscious biases when I'm screening candidates about they'll be good, they won't be good, based on various sort of learned experiences. AI doesn't have those blinkers necessarily, depending on what data they've been trained on. So maybe can remove biases in that way. However, we've got to be so careful about how and where we're using it. So we don't want to kind of surrender too much control. What you were speaking about there, and I'm glad you kind of mentioned it because it slipped my mind, is intuition. I think that's so important. And as I said, the importance of the human element is massively understated, but I think that of intuition is as well. Understanding what's not being said, understanding actually this hiring manager I'm working with, he's quite confrontational or very submissive. Someone coming in that's the opposite, although could balance the team, is probably going to, create a difficult hiring or interview process. So either I've got to advise that candidate or withdraw them from the process. Understanding those particular nuances which wouldn't be extracted by AI from a job description or a company overview, I think those things are essential and going to become more critical for those that maintain the right balance of human and
Right. I mean, it is about also understanding how humans work.
Yeah.
And I know AI eventually will get better and better at it. But as you were talking, I remember the case we had a year ago, and we were actually headhunting a top tier engineers. And as you know, all around the world, they're really hard to find and attract. So irregardless what kind of tools you're using, if they're not working on engineers, it's not an easy pass. But however, our team actually figured out and analyzed their behavior, so we figure out which companies were the targeted companies, how do they behave, what are they doing during the day. And they actually made not regular job ads, but small calls for an action, let's say, and they actually posted on a stop signs in front of the buildings where the companies were situated, because those teams were having a regular cigarette break in front of those. And actually, this is how we managed to get the candidates and attract them. So maybe the future of AI is, providing all the information that we have about certain things and, asking for certain recruitment campaigns or whatever. So I think it's up to humans as well to figure out how to use certain tools to a maximum capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that so interesting. And I think, as I said about removing the blind spots, using AI to kind of research that and understand those kind of patterns of behaviors. If you're a hiring manager, but you're hiring for, say, you're not an engineer and you're hiring a technical person, their whole way of thinking and their whole way of working is going to be different. When we've got the unconscious bias of liking people who are like ourselves and speak and act how we act, that's not necessarily going to translate into an effective hiring strategy for, technical or non-technical or, different roles within the organizations. And I think AI can certainly be used to kind of enhance that, and also just ways of attracting candidates, the way you attract technical candidates, to the new next whiz or the next big kind of, hyper growth scale up is very different to how you're maybe going to attract someone in finance or someone in law or something else. And understanding those particular nuances of how each candidate and how each client operates is certainly going to be a useful application of using AI in the right way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
Amazing. Well, look, we've covered so much on this, from your journey, your kind of entrepreneurial background, your roots, the reason that you kind of got into that entrepreneurial journey yourself, your success in selling the business twice, deciding to stay on, as many wouldn't have done, to kind of steer the ship and build the most successful recruitment platform in the Balkan regions. You've obviously shared your kind of insights into AI and how you think it can be used and will be used and should be used. One thing we've not done yet, but I mentioned at the start of the podcast, is you've launched your own podcast channel. Would love to introduce it, let people know where they can kind of connect with you and stay engaged with your channel.
Yeah, it started 5 months ago. I was actually lucky enough to start this podcast with one of the biggest media group called the Slobodzenie. So it's a really huge media platform that actually provides also TV platform and TV broadcasting of the podcast, also articles about it in newspapers, social media coverage and so on. So the name of the podcast is Životna škola, which basically means school of life. And it's actually a very raw raw and unfiltered stories, about entrepreneurship, business success, but also in general personal growth and the struggles people go through. So the questions that I actually ask my guests, these are not the questions you normally ask in boardrooms or in interviews. So it's a really place for honest conversation about what life really teaches, about what's really deep in our soul. It's not about diplomas or job titles. And it has been an extraordinary experience for me, these past few months, because although I've been working in different industries and different sectors, governmental, non-governmental, there is so much to learn. And at the end of the day, it's all about the modesty. It's all about taking things easy and slow in life. So it's been amazing experience, talking to people from this different industries. And what I've realized, what connects us, it's not an ambition, it's a constant process of becoming. We're learning how to live, how to love, how to lead, how to lose, all at once. So the reason why I actually started the podcast, I had a feeling that there wasn't enough space where people could speak honestly about the real life journeys behind the success, the doubts, pivots, the breakthroughs. And I think, after 13, 14 episodes, we are already on that journey. I'm very, very happy how it worked out so far.
Amazing. Well, you mentioned modesty. It's incredibly modest of you joining me on my platform. I think my kind of budget and my marketing capabilities are far kind of less than, obviously this kind of platform you set up. So I'm incredibly grateful for that. And I will, of course, be a subscriber of your podcast. I think there's definitely a need for more. There's a lot of podcasts out there kind of glamorizing the journey of a founder and talking about the kind of the success stories of the CEOs, the founders that have grown these businesses, but there's not enough kind of that raw conversation about, actually what was it like being in the trenches and, building this thing to the multi-million, billion, whatever it is valuation you managed to achieve. So obviously massively applaud you for that. And I will be following the podcast. As a kind of final kind of closing thought, is there any key kind of takeaways or lessons or thoughts that you want to leave the listeners with?
Well, maybe just reflecting on what you just said, I think we should never forget, that regardless of where we are in life, we were all of us, we were somewhere at the beginning. And, I think it's very important to remember that feeling and understand that other people are in different stages and to be out there for people, to help, to mentor, to provide the passion or just to listen. And I think that's what makes us humans. We'll have AI, we'll have all the tools and, hopefully work, not more, but I think the final thoughts are, I think human connection, it's nowadays more important than ever.
Absolutely. I agree. And I'm incredibly grateful for, your contribution, all the kind of the thoughts, the mentorship, whatever you've given me so far, all the takeaways for the listeners. And, I thank the listeners for tuning in, and hopefully they've got as much from this episode as I have. It's truly been a pleasure.
I'm really happy and I'm grateful to be part of your journey and looking forward to see where it's going to take you.
Thank you.
Thank you.